And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my friend Christy Tucker. Christy has been an incredible supporter of TLDC, has spoken numerous times. Um, I I don't know right now when I think about L&D and LinkedIn in particular, I don't know of anyone that has been more impactful that I've seen than Christy. So yes, let me tell you a little bit about Christy if you don't already know. Christy Tucker is a learning experience design consultant with 20 plus years of experience. She specializes in scenario-based learning to promote real-world skill transfer. Christie's developed training for Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and universities, and shares insights through her long running blog and frequent presentations at instructional design conferences. Wait, what was the blog again? Wait, is it Cinead or what's the?
So the blog is technically experiencing e-learning, but
Okay,
nobody knows that name of it. My company is Cinead Learning.
that's
So
right.
therefore, you remembered right. There you go.
So, and I'll post a link to Christie's blog. If you follow Christy at all on LinkedIn, you know that she has been absolutely incredible at talking about AI generating images. And I don't know, Christy was just telling me earlier that she's probably created over 1,000 images, well over 1,000, I'm sure, in using AI. So everybody, please help me welcome Christy as our final closing keynote for AIDC 25. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let you take over.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction. I'm happy to be here as always. I love the TLDC community, and so it is fun to see a few familiar names and some new names out there in the audience. So, I'm talking today about minimizing bias in AI generated images. I know that we are focused on inclusion in many different aspects of inclusion throughout this whole conference. And specifically today, we're going to talk about AI images and the problems and some solutions. So, for those of you who don't know me, just on the like, why should you listen to me on AI images? Um, and as Louise mentioned, have generated over 1,000 images with AI. I've done lots of experimentation with this and lots of using it. Because of my focus on scenario-based learning, I always have this need for consistent character images, and that's part of what got me interested in it. The other thing is that because I have this blog and I put out a blog post every week, and coming up with images for my blog posts has always been a challenge too. And so between those two things, I've had reasons to go get things because I have trouble getting them with getting what I want out of stock images. And so AI image generators solve a real problem for me, both in on my blog and doing header images and for doing scenarios and for doing e-learning. And so that's the work I do. I always am careful to, I don't want to present myself as an expert in AI. It's such a big topic and I am reluctant to give myself that label. But I do come at this as a practitioner who uses it a bunch and therefore can show you some hands-on things and what I've figured out for solutions and where I think the technology is not quite there yet. So I'm not going to talk too much about tools today. Most of my focus is on the prompting and the way you use the language. So it doesn't really matter too much which tools you use for this. Midjourney is the primary one. If you've seen my work, that's the primary one I use. Flux is a great alternative. Um, we'll talk a bit about some of the different purposes of these. But regardless of which tool you have access to, these prompt tips will generally apply. So let's level set by talking about the problem first. In the chat, how would you describe a typical person in a stock image? We've all had, we've had all of these experiences probably with using stock images. What do you see when you go look for stuff? And Rhoda about the Firefly. Firefly isn't one that I've used, but all of the tips should apply there. So it again doesn't matter which tool you're using. There are some differences between tools, but generally the tips will work. So in the chat, um, what have you, yeah, typical stock image, whitewashed and ableist, white, thin, young, people of non-color, very generic, generic surroundings, blank stare. Laura, I think that blank stare is one of those. That's either the blank stare or, as Kim said, the smiling and happy. I was just gonna say the smiling and happy. Like exaggerated expressions. So, yeah, yeah. Conventionally attractive, perhaps, right? That does tend to be the case. So, if we've been using stock images, if you've been using character image libraries, many of those also have had bias. And one of my real goals with using AI image generation is that it should be better than what I can get in stock images. It should be, I'm not using the same character all the time that we've all seen at Sumi too many times in e-learning or whichever character, right? And you use that same character in a bunch of different scenarios and they're a different, completely different character, but the same visuals. Um, so, we do that and AI gives us an opportunity to do something better, to do something unique and to do a much wider range of representation. So, so the bias in AI images is partly due to the source images, right? The stock images that had all of the biased representation contributes to what we see in AI generation. AI image generators, just like LLMs like ChatGPT, make predictions based on likely patterns, and those likely patterns are often stereotypical. And so AI, if you're not careful, can often actually be even more stereotypical than stock images. So I'm going to give you a couple, we'll run through a couple of bad examples, but I'm pretty sure if you're here and you've stuck it out to the last session of this conference, I don't need you to convince you that the AI is biased. If in all of these prompts in this next little set, I used the phrase editorial photo. I'm deliberately doing very basic prompts here just to see what the stereotype will be, what it'll give me. So CEO, you will not be shocked to notice that they are all white men. Doctor, also all white men. Nurse, I was surprised at how dated the nurses looked, but I was not surprised that they're all women. Right? This is what you'd expect if you ask an AI for this, right? Criminal, that one, there's there's a long list of problems. If we do a manager talking to an employee, there are, let's see, out of 8 people in those images, 7 are men. And I will say in the one image where there's a woman, the which one is the manager is probably the man, right? Yeah, bearded man. So, yeah, this one's got some problems too. An autistic person, stereotypically white boys. Um, and problems with that representation. I was pleasantly surprised. So literally this was just a prompt of a person using a wheelchair. I was surprised at the bright colors in the background. I will say that these wheelchairs are better than what I had gotten a year ago. And we'll talk more about um, representing visible disabilities in detail, in more detail later. So this was better than I expected, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, autistic representation in stock images is generally terrible, so we're not really surprised that, but like Midjourney really leans into the stereotypes there. Um, I was actually a little surprised on Midjourney when I posted for a group of people that I did get some more diversity in those groups than I was expecting. They're still like they look very stock, like staring blankly at whoever it was in the comments who talked about like that blank stare. I do feel that there's a bit of this. They're all sort of color coordinated and it's a little weird. Um, I'm not actually going to talk more about the bias in AI image generation too much. If you all know Tristan Sylvester, she did a fantastic webinar about ethical AI, basically specifically about the bias in AI, and shared research and things. And so you can look her up on Training Mag Network, and I will put that link in chat so you can go check that out. And I would highly recommend that you go listen to the recording of her session because I feel like I don't need to do it as well because she did such a good job on that in February. So she's got lots of citations and stuff. So, um, you all are probably practitioners. What are the challenges? What are the big challenges that you've seen with bias? If you've been working with AI generated images, are there any, especially if there's any big challenges that I didn't just show as I was running through those quickly? Anything that I left off that I didn't do? I'll give you a moment in the chat. Wait staff seem to be Latino. Yeah, I didn't do too many of the um doing things by careers. But yeah, kitchen employees, and so Tristan has a number of really good examples of that. Yeah, generating the stereotypes within cultural and ethnic groups, and age is another issue. Yeah, I didn't show anything with age in here. Um, yeah, size differences, body type, weight, um, and that's definitely a problem. Just like stock images do tend to be white and slim, um, AI images tend to be white and slim unless you ask for something else. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that we have to look for when we're doing these AI images. So we've talked now about the problem, let's get into the solution. If you don't specifically prompt for inclusive images, you will not generate them. If you take nothing else out of this session, this is the thing I want you to get, is that you have to specifically prompt for the types of things that we've been mentioning. Because if you just do very basic prompts and just go with the default by, for example, a job role, you will get these stereotypes reinforced. And the images are going to reveal quite a bit of bias unless you are actively countering it. And also, sometimes even when you prompt for inclusive images, there will be problems. So we'll take that as like the second note of things that you should know. So the structure that I use, and this is a structure that again should work in any of the tools. So regardless of whichever tool, if you're on Firefly, if you're on whichever, the image style, the subject, so what's the person, action of what they're doing, physical characteristics, clothes, anything in the setting in the background, any additional details. There's definitely some fluid order here. But generally, the things that you've put first in the prompt, the AI will treat as more important, and So you can sometimes get different results by pushing things more towards the beginning of your prompt. And so depending on what you want to emphasize and what's most critical for the AI to get right, you might change around this order a little bit. You don't necessarily need every part of this for every prompt, but I'll show you some examples. So this is one that I generated in Midjourney. And while I do believe that if you really looked at this and drew lines for the shadows, that you would figure out that it's AI and not real, I do think that this is probably good enough that you could use it as an image in a course, right? Um, Editorial photo, Asian woman working on a laptop in a sunny home office, focused expression, blue coffee mug on the desk. So this is that example. So if we break this down, I use this phrase editorial photo in most of my photorealistic images. You will see advice from other sources talking about um, hyper realistic is often one that's used, and I personally don't find that I get great results. I find I get sort of surreal, plasticky things when we say hyper realistic. Um, Award-winning photo or cinematic. I've seen cinematic in some things too, and cinematic tends to be overly dramatic lighting, and it's not actually what I want for most training purposes. I actually want it to look a bit more realistic. So editorial photo is my key phrase here. The subject is an Asian woman. The action she's doing is working on a laptop. Her setting is a sunny home office. Characteristic in this case is focused expression. Sometimes that'll be some physical characteristics about their hair or their clothes or something else. And then I had another detail of having a blue coffee mug on the desk. So this is how that breaks down in a prompt. Here's another example. Somebody on LinkedIn had said, "Oh, I have not been able to get an older woman in a sari." I'm like, I can get an older woman in a sari, right? So I did. So I used this as the structure that I did. The order switched around a little bit here, but you see, editorial photo is the style. I have more of the characteristics of the person, what she's wearing, what her hair is, her age. That was more important than the action, which in this case was just the sort of talking, which wasn't as important. Background, this is cropped a little bit, so you can't see as much of the background, but there is a bit of a conference background back there. So this is that structure. And again, you can see how I've played with it a little bit. So the characteristics note, when we talked about all of the problems that we've had in generating images, these are the characteristics, right? You talk about gender, you talk about race, you talk about ethnicity, you talk about age. You might mention a hair. You might need to mention body type because if you don't, it's going to probably be skinny. So all of these things you do have to specifically say. And somebody recently commented that it feels weird to her to have to really specifically note all of these things to say, well, you know, I want this to be a Latina woman. But, if you were searching stock photos and you didn't specify you want a black man working in an office, you were going to probably get somebody white, right? So you were already probably using some of those terms if you were doing searching in stock images, and you have to be really specific in order to counter the bias. There just is not a way around it. So here's another example of this. So we have, again, editorial photo. I did non-binary person in a wheelchair. It did not quite get the large gauge earrings that I was kind of looking for that instead of it went more for the chunky jewelry. I probably could have played with it a little bit more, but this still felt like a pretty decent image. For hairstyles, I will say that some of the AI image generators do a better job with natural hairstyles than others. Midjourney does pretty well. ChatGPT does not. It tends to simplify overall. ChatGPT just in general doesn't have kind of this level of detail. Yeah, and large gauge ear spacers. I think you're right, Christina. Like I would have needed to play with that prompt a little bit better, right? You have to be really specific. As right, anything that you've done with working with AI, you know that you have to be really specific in describing what you want and get the precise terms. And I think Christina probably, I bet I could get it. But this was one that I used for a scenario. I will say I asked for braids and I got twists, but I also really liked this hairstyle, so I went with it. Um, and that's a fair amount of detail on that. And I will say one difference between tools. Midjourney does pretty well at doing different poses. I will say the background wasn't as consistent in Midjourney, but the character, and it did keep her hair pretty consistent. If you look closely in some of these, she's wearing a watch on her left wrist, and some of them she's wearing a bracelet. And some of them she's wearing nothing on her left wrist. But it is overall, I thought it did a pretty good job keeping her consistent. So if you're doing character images, the ones where you need multiple images of the same person, you need to look for a tool that does that. And the other tip is give it a reference image for every generation you do. Image styles. We can get more diverse images with this kind of prompt structure, even without going photorealistic. Um, so this is one that somebody had said she was having a lot of trouble getting something that looked hand sketched of a Maori man without facial tattoos, um, with somewhat longer hair and working at a computer. That is something that is so specific you were never going to find it in stock images, right? And so that this was one that I wanted to I experimented with to see if I could get something for her. And yeah, I this one after it took several iterations, and you can see in this one to get the specific kind of sketch style she was looking for, I needed to have more of that language. And I front loaded that part of the prompt. That this was a line drawing, it was hand drawn, it was marker, it was black and white. And even this, it still didn't get it right every time, but I did get one and then could do multiple different poses from this. Internet, the question about can you do different poses from a photo upload? Um, I think on Midjourney you have to have been using it for a while before you can edit other existing images or use them as a reference image. Runway is another one that you can definitely use. I've done the generate an image in Midjourney and then go into Runway to generate additional poses because Runway you can put in multiple reference images and put them together in a scene. So that would be another option. Um, Colored pencil sketch is another option that can work. You can see in this one, it's again that same thing of image type, subject, the characteristics about age and what he's wearing, his expression. If you're trying to do something that you want to do as a cutout photo, some of the tools can generate a transparent background. Um, that but a white background generally will make it easier, even if you have to remove the background and something else. And yes, Kim, Midjourney will on sketches sometimes generate something that looks like a signature on if you try to prompt for something hand drawn or as a sketch, because that's what it trained on. But that style I find can be nice. Um, asking for a vector illustration doesn't necessarily mean you actually get a vector file as your output. Midjourney does not output to SVG, but it will take that style, and I find that this is a useful kind of style for training purposes. So you can try asking for illustrations. This is another one with a vector illustration showing somebody with a hearing aid. It did, I'll show a bit more about the hearing aid and the behind the scenes on that one. Vector illustration, however, I get very different results sometimes, depending on what it is. So you may get very different styles on that. So it depends on, I will say in several of these, I've got other image prompts, and some of the tools you can use images as prompts for style. So it'll copy the style from other things. This is a good example of, this was one where I used a style code so that it generated a bunch of images all in the specific style. If you don't have the ability to do a style image, one useful phrase for illustrations is modern corporate style. That tends to give me a style that looks like it fits in a training program, right? Realistic body proportions, generally, you know, not too wild colors. The people look like real people. So you can, that's one phrase. Modern corporate style is a useful phrase in your illustrations. Digital illustration is another phrase that I have found gets me pretty good results. This was one that, again, realistic body proportions. And you can see all of these follow that same general structure that I showed you earlier. It is the style, the subject, something either about the characteristics, the action, the clothes. In all of these, I am prompting, I'm generally prompting at least gender and race or ethnicity in just about every image that I do. Because, I'm not gonna get, if I say a news anchor, I am going to get a white man if I don't specify otherwise. So all of this should be um, just kind of seeing this kind of structure. If you use this kind of structure, that will help you get better results. Now, if you notice on my prompts, it's all phrases. It's not complete sentences. If you look at there are tools to generate image prompts, and they will often give you giant paragraphs with a whole bunch of words, and sometimes like a paragraph with multiple complete sentences. For most image generation tools, you are better off doing phrases than long sentences. And without going too technical, the it really is something where um, you it'll split up these phrases into separate tokens, and the more tokens you have in your prompt, the easier it is for it to lose things and get confused. And yes, Kim, I do find it's helpful to separate the phrases with commas or semicolons, something like that. So you've got some separation. You're then helping the AI figure out which terms go together. This one obviously didn't have too many commas, but this one had more separation in the phrases, and that tends to be how I'm doing it. You can certainly experiment with the tools out there that'll give you image image prompts, right? You can ask ChatGPT, well, how do I prompt for such and such? I find that really useful if you've got an image that you like and you don't know how to describe the style, or you've got some element of an image that you want, putting it into ChatGPT and saying, how would I describe this style of image or this element in a prompt for an AI image generator, it can give you some of that language. Because part of the deal with AI image generation is you have to learn the language to describe the things that you want. Right? Just like in using an LLM, the more you can specifically describe the things you want, the more likely you are to be able to get the results that you want. Same thing with the image generators. But where with an LLM, it benefits you to add a paragraph of context, image generation is the opposite. You need to trim down to these phrases. So Christina asks, would those same descriptions help you and find similar images in a stock photo Im library? Potentially, yeah. So some of these things, thinking about like line icons or one-line drawings or something, right? You could potentially look for things if you figure out language for image styles. That's something where I feel like I'm constantly learning that language as I work more with AI images. So you've been listening to me talk for quite a while. Um, while you are typing here, if you've got some other tip that I didn't talk about, I'm going to talk about some continuing challenges next. But if you've got some other tip of something that I didn't mention, we can all learn from each other here. You may have something that I haven't figured out. Um, I see Basil or Basil, and I'm not sure how you're going to say how you say your name, but I'll say both, and hopefully one of them will be right. In general, how would you show autistic representation when it's neurological? And there's a reason actually in the next section that I'm going to talk about images representing visible disabilities, because I will say that I think that that is an easier thing. Um, I guess to a large extent, if you're representing somebody who is autistic, most of the time you're not going to be able to tell, right? Because that is the reality of things. Um, I would, if I was, say, writing a scenario or depicting things with depicting autism, I would make sure that I had some variety in gender and race. Um, that I was showing some of that inclusion. Not showing all men, not showing all young men, not showing all young white men or boys. You could do some of the things of um, I think the last time I needed to do images for autism was talking about children, and so I did have a picture of a boy lining up his cars in rows rather than playing on a racetrack, which is somewhat a stereotypical thing, but um, is also a true difference in how children tend to play. So that is something that's, but it is tricky um, on figuring out how to visually represent non-visible disabilities. I think that that's an ongoing challenge. All right. So, continuing challenges. There's a lot of stuff where the AI can do pretty well if you prompt carefully, right? I've just kind of shown that. And the using reference images, using more specific language, actually prompting for the characteristics you want. All of that is helpful. So, continuing challenges. So there are things, however, where the AI image generators still struggle. If you have large groups of people, AI image generators have a hard time with this. This was a prompt. This is a bad prompt, frankly. This was somebody else's prompt. Um, and when he did it, he got all pretty much all white men. I've trained Midjourney has some personalization, so I got a more diverse group. However, if you look at the faces in the background, they are terrible, right? This is absolutely a fail. And lots of faces in a photorealistic image is going to fail in most AI image generation right now. Um, trying to focus on a single subject at a time will make things easier. Um, and part of this is that it's just a matter of the processing power of these tools And the more things you give them to focus on, the less energy it has to do each one accurately. And so that's why you get um, terrible photos. So if you have to do groups, a simpler illustration style will do better. Um, you also can try generating a small part of the image and then panning out to add more people. That can sometimes help too because then you're using the processing piecemeal, and that can also help if you have to do groups. And so, getting diverse groups of people. Um, Again, you do have to do some prompting for diverse or multiracial, um, because that's that's going to be an important thing in order to get a group of people that is more diverse. This was when I used that modern corporate style as the illustration prompt. Another thing, I have not found a single AI tool that can show somebody writing with their left hand. No, that's not a disability, but it is a good sign of how much the tools are driven by patterns. And even when I prompt for left-handedness, and I tried, there are more iterations than what you see here. Right? This is in the image, it is a left-handed person writing in a notebook in a cozy coffee shop. A woman writing with her left hand in a notebook in a cozy coffee shop. Focus on the left hand. Nope. Because more images have right-handed, the AI does not know how to draw somebody writing with their left hand. And yes, you can flip the image, but also I should be able to do this in AI. So there are sometimes you will see things like this that are just hard to do in AI. It's not just you, it is the tools. Um, they are improving all the time, and I hope 6 months from now I will be able to generate a person writing with their left hand, but I have not been able to do it yet. And I have tried several tools. So, disability representation is improving but still has issues. A woman in a motorized wheelchair. We saw some wheelchairs earlier that were not terrible. I feel like the first one in this row is probably all right. Actually, the first and last one might be okay. The ones in the middle that have the big computer screen in the front are weird. I also suspect that these look okay to me because um, I don't know motorized wheelchairs well enough to know the parts of this that are not accurate. And I suspect if I had somebody who actually uses a motorized wheelchair look at this, that it is hallucinating a lot. Wheelchairs are definitely better than a year ago, though. Um, ChatGPT does pretty well. I would say, for all that I generally don't love ChatGPT because I think it has that blank stare that you get in a lot of stock images that was mentioned earlier. But I will say that this was pretty good as a motorized wheelchair. So it is some of the different tools will do somewhat better. Forearm crutches. Midjourney has no idea what I'm talking about. There's a lot more failures than what I'm showing here. It tries to have two crutches. The thing I was actually looking for was this. ChatGPT, again, can figure out what forearm crutches are because it is better at getting the context. It's just that it will not simultaneously show both crutches and her entire face. It focuses the way that terrible stock images focus on crutches or wheelchair or whatever assistive technology without showing the whole person. ChatGPT carries that over. And I tried. This is this is not the next iteration. This is multiple iterations later. Full body photo showing the top of the head. Usually with images, if you're trying to get full body, if you talk about the shoes and the hair, you can generally get no, no. ChatGPT will not give me an entire person's face. Hearing aids. Better, I will say it's better than it was. But I showed this image, I showed an image earlier, but if I try to do like somebody with a hearing aid, um, working at a computer, I invariably get a lot of headphones. So I ended up in this one taking one that was kind of close. And then in Midjourney, you can in paint in a specific area. Photoshop has that ability. Several tools have that ability. So I went through a dozen different variations before I found one that looked at least plausible, like a hearing aid. So this is also part of it too, if you're trying to represent disabilities, is that you and making inclusive images in general. You generate it and then you may have to regenerate, you may have to tweak your prompt. You may have to do some editing of a certain part of it in order to get things right. Another request that somebody had asked was trying to get she needs to show images of generally older women using support bars in a bathroom. And so I had several attempts at this. I'm like, she's like, "Oh, I can't get a bar that is attached in two places against a wall and a woman with the right number of limbs grabbing the support bar." So it's like, yeah, that does sound challenging. So I got this one, which we agreed was probably good. The AI does not understand the context of what I want the support bar for. It got the fact that I wanted a woman. It got the fact that there is a support bar and it is attached to the wall in at least two places. It does not understand what the support bar is supposed to be doing, right? AI fails at context. And so you get things like this. This was one of my other favorite, and I tried a bunch of different, I tried a bunch of different tools to try to get this one right, and then shared the failures with her of like, yeah. So, and I do want you to like part of this is I do want you to be aware that like, yes, I do lots of this. Also, I have a lot of failures, and that is part of the process. So if you're getting failures on things, don't feel like sometimes, sometimes it is that you need a different prompt. And sometimes it is that the AI doesn't understand what this is. So this was not really the kind of support bar I was looking for. I mean, I don't even know what's going on with that door. This like toilet directly off a long hallway. I mean, there are this image. I love this failure. So, all right. One of the other areas where I still find problems is with women's clothes. One of my somebody I know who's been using Midjourney for a while and has ended up actually moving away from Midjourney because, as she said, it keeps defaulting to thirst trap. So I was trying to generate image again, forearm crutches, still like these are older ones. Um, but I kept getting like the more iterations I did of this character, the more see-through her shirt got. And this is a problem in a number of the AI image generation tools. They because they get used for a lot of um very stereotypical hypersexualized image generation, you have to watch this quite a bit. This was a pretty egregious example. There were a couple others in that set. Even this, which was a pretty recent example that I was using to test out as a character to test something out. And somebody had commented afterwards about how low her shirt is unbuttoned. And I admit I didn't even catch it initially, but it is something to pay attention to because I've seen this with people using AI image generation to generate their headshots. Um, and then, but it will give you a, it's probably one button further down than you might do in real life. And I could go in with this, the original ones on the top, and then I went in and did a couple of edits to get one that was I think this one in the lower right is finally like probably a more work appropriate neckline. But you know, that's something that you have to watch, right? How far down is the shirt unbuttoned? So those are things that continue to be challenges. I think so again, we can prompt around them and we can look for them. There are things, especially in assistive representing assistive technology, that partly because there are so few good examples of that in the stock images, the tools don't have enough to draw from, and they continue to have trouble with that. Um, so sometimes you can get it, and sometimes you can use reference images or describe, and sometimes I think the tools are not there yet. I will say that these are already better than they were a year ago, and I think a year from now it will continue to be better. These tools are advancing so fast. Um, but we have to keep looking for those improvements in generating inclusive images. So, other challenges, other questions. I see there's a question here. This is related, I think, harkening back to when we were talking about representing autism. Just if it's non-visible, why are you trying to make it visible? And that's a valid question, right? Sometimes it is the like, well, should we how much are we representing a trans character and making them obviously trans versus do you know that this person is trans or not? Most of the time, probably not, right? There, and I think with disabilities, there's that question. Do you need to do something for autism? In the specific course that I was thinking of, it was a course on where we were talking about a bunch of different disabilities. And so we did have pictures representing those disabilities. I used a site called disabilityimages.com that does have people. So in that particular case, I will say one of our solutions was that there are, I think it's actually, that site has been bought by somebody else now, so it's under something else. I used images of somebody who actually was autistic. Um, and sometimes the representation matters. It was specifically in like childcare settings and how do you support kids with different um, special healthcare needs and with different disabilities. Um, so in that particular case, one of our goals in the images was to have counter stereotypical images of kids with disabilities. That there were no staged stock photos of smiling able-bodied kids pretending to use a wheelchair, right? So we had a lot of specific things about representing different types of disabilities, leg braces and prosthetics, and limb differences and feeding tubes and glucose monitors and all of these kids using walkers, um, all of those things. So that was part of the goal in that particular class was to really have lots of representation to challenge. And some of that was and of kids doing things, right? Playing on playgrounds with other kids, building stuff, doing math. We were using the images to counter stereotypes. And so that was part of the goal in that one. Well, you may be still typing. If you've got other stuff, if you've got stuff that you've tried to generate and haven't, um, if you are interested in having a copy of the slides so that you can um, see all of the prompts that I got from this, it is up on my website. And so you get all those prompts so that I don't have I haven't figured out any fun mnemonic for, how to do those image prompts. Maybe I'll figure one out. But you can see all those prompts so that you can steal them and hopefully get better ones for yourself. Let's see. Natalie asked if it is this one. It is not this one, but that's also a good one. The one that I had used was previously called disability images. We'll see if it'll come up. This page with the handouts. If you haven't seen Midjourney, um, this is if you saw it previously, it used to be in Discord, and lots of people found it um, challenging, but this is what it looks like in the tool now. But disability images is that one's one of the sites that I've used. There are a couple of other stock photo sites, and I will say there are definitely things that I would frankly still go for um getting a stock photo or a stock photo from a specific one of those specific sites because there are specific things that the AI just can't do right now. So, any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A? You can keep typing. Otherwise, I will let me uh, put my contact info up too.
I can bring up something with
Yeah.
Midjourney. I actually don't have a subscription to Midjourney anymore. I just didn't use it as much as I thought I would, but
Mhm.
I was tried to use it to generate some images for the band that I'm in, and I play like in a rock band with three white males. But when all of the images that I plugged in, like they would turn out okay, like when I'd regenerate something, but for some reason, like my image would change like to this,
Mm.
I don't know, it would hyper sort of racialize an Asian person.
Yeah.
Like my eyes were completely different and my just like it
Uh,
would just totally change it. I'm like, what is going on here? And yeah, so I couldn't really use it for that because that was weirdly weird.
yeah. So were you actually uploading a photo of you and the other people to try to do for stuff?
Yeah, yeah, of my
Um,
band. We had like some photos, some professional photos that we actually took, and I thought, oh, let's just change this up and see if we can add different elements to it. But they would turn out okay, the other guys, but me, not so much.
ouch. I will say it is one of the things where I think trying different tools to see if you get different results
Yeah,
is is potentially there. I might try as much Midjourney is the tool I use the most because I like the style. I think I can get a broader range of diversity and realistic diversity for even for trickier things like the Maori, right? That I can do that and get a little bit better on some of these things. But Runway is pretty good with reference images, and Imagen is pretty good um, with reference images. So I might try, if I were you, I might try doing different ones. Midjourney will also give you different results depending on how you've personalized it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in version 7, I think that like my friend who was talking about how much she was finding things to be too hypersexualized in the images. I think I've done enough training now in the current version of Midjourney that I don't get as much of that.
right,
Still, the one blouse too far down, but I don't tend to get I haven't had to squint at an image to see if it's trying to have a nipple in there in a
right.
while, fortunately. Was definitely a problem in earlier versions.
Wow.
But yeah. All right, well so I guess I would try. I mean, if you want to send me something, I could certainly try something with that. Like I'm not this I mean this is half of how I figured stuff out is like I'll post stuff or I'll see people on LinkedIn having trouble with something and then I'm like, "Oh, well, I wonder if I can get that."
Right,
And like, no, I can't get two people throwing a frisbee back and forth on a video that doesn't have the weirdest physics ever. Nope, I
right.
can't do that.
Yeah.
Some of these things are, but some of these things I've figured out by doing some of that. So yes. So since there was a question, we've got a few minutes. Let me do a little bit of like how do I iterate images? So, do you play bass
No, I'm the
or
singer and the
you're the
guitar
singer?
player.
Okay. Well, without,
Ooh, okay, we're actually doing this.
sure. It won't be you.
Yeah. Oh, fun. This is making me nervous.
It is live and we have no net. Uh, and let's see. I'm gonna do some commas here so that I separate it. Um, let's see what this does. Okay, so I have right now in Midjourney, I have draft mode going on, which will be
Hmm.
fast, which for a
Okay.
live demo is what I want. Um, And so this will be pretty fast, and then we'll see. One of the things in Midjourney is that it does do four by default. So you get a variety of things. With image generation, I think it's helpful of this. Um, I mean,
That's not terrible. It's not
that's
terrible.
not
Actually, that's not bad. That's not bad.
right. Like this would be so on this one. So we could do um from draft, I would do and usually do an enhance. We'll get it up a little bit. Um, There's also in Midjourney, actually, I guess it is. Okay, it ran pretty fast. So these are, take a second to load here. It does not want to show me that one. It's thinking about it. Being a little slower loading.
It's funny. I look at those and I think, oh yeah, that looks more like my uncle than it would like look like me. Just because of the gray hair, I keep
Yeah.
forgetting that, you know.
All right, this is being super slow loading. You can see that that's the process though, right?
Yeah.
Like I can see that this would be what it is. But if I, for example, so let's say I might go in and take one of these since the other ones are being very slow. In Midjourney, I can also edit things. It does not want to let me edit from a draft like that. Okay, let's pick a different image. Um, let's take one of these other images that I've used. So one of the things that I can do here is that one must be a draft too. Okay, sorry. Did a lot of draft images as I was working on things here. Um, we'll go to one of these. Let's see if it'll bring it on. If I try and edit. It's being a little slow loading. This is always, I mean, Midjourney is a ton faster than ChatGPT, but I think while I'm sharing screen right now, it's going to continue to be pretty slow. Yeah, I think Zoom and Chat and Midjourney at the same time is not cooperating.
So
Okay,
there's different levels of subscription, right? For Midjourney or
right.
yeah, depending.
Yeah, so I'm on basically the $10 a month plan, which I think as an annual is something like $100 a year.
Okay.
I was definitely spending more than $100 a year on stock image subscriptions and character image subscriptions
Hmm.
previously. So for me, this is worthwhile for me.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'm glad your sister is appreciating this. I mean, Luis, if you want to prompt something that we could, I'm happy to generate an image of your sister if you want to give me a prompt. We'll get
She'd
Maria in
love
here
that
too.
too.
Um, but I will also say the other tool that I do use a lot for image generation. The reason you saw this, you saw my big list of tools. I use a tool called Poe. Instead of paying for all of right, ChatGPT, Claude, all of these things are like $20 a month on their own. I do pay
Um,
for Midjourney separately, but Poe is a tool that is a combined tool that lets you do a lot of different ones. So this is the list of image generation bots that you can use with Poe. For $20 a month, you get access to all of these. Imogen, Flux, um, Gemini, ideogram, which is better at doing text. Um, there are, I think Recraft was in here. Topaz for upscaling images. There's a bunch of these in here. So this is something that um, I use. There's some video generation. There's some audio generation in here. You don't get the full. There's only a handful of voices for 11 Labs, but if you're doing a few of these, for me, it makes more sense to spend $20 a month for this and to get access to a bunch of these different things. And that's part of why I can experiment with all the different image tools because I'm not paying for 8 different image tools. I'm paying for one thing and then I'm trying it out in different things. So if I get stuck in one, well, I'll go run it in Flux or I'll go run it in Imagen or I'll do something else and try and do that there. So that's my other final tip. I know I'm at time now, but so I will stop sharing. But Maria, I'm glad I gave you a chuckle today. So, um,
Yeah,
but
she's definitely
accomplish
better
nothing
looking than me,
else.
so yeah, it's true. Thank you. All right, well, Christy, that was really, really helpful. I know, like for prompting, like, is
Mhm.
there anything that you use to help you with prompts at all, or is it basically something that you've managed to kind of streamline, just get better at altogether on your own?
So I do, there are definitely some people I follow on LinkedIn and elsewhere that share stuff about Midjourney, and I do follow some other people. So then I've stolen prompts. Like editorial photo was something that from I'm pretty sure Rory Flynn. Rory Flynn shares a bunch of Midjourney stuff, and it's not at all geared towards L&D. And his examples are much more marketing focused.
Hmm.
There's definitely people using AI images in marketing where we can definitely go learn from them. But Rory Flynn has some like giant cheat sheets for Midjourney, and I've done several of his things. Um, and so that's definitely out there. A lot of this, however, is experimenting and figuring out what works.
Right.
I do take things from him and from oh, I'm trying to remember. There's another Chinese. I'll have to find. I'll have to. This will clearly has to be another LinkedIn post for another day of the like, who is it that I'm following
Right.
on for Midjourney because I do have several people that I follow and then take things from. So it is also reasonable to try using ChatGPT or whatever to say, help me write a prompt. There are tools that will help you write prompts for images.
Hmm.
I will say that I'm at a point for myself where I can do better on my own generally than what those auto image prompt generators will do.
Right.
But you can definitely try it and see what you get.
Yeah, because I have done in the past, I have taken like say that a stock photo that I really liked, uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, write me a prompt that would give me, good results for
Hmm.
something out of Midjourney. And I have tried that in the past. I just as a test.
Yeah.
And it seemed like the results from what I recall were good, but I just wanted to play around with that and
Yeah.
thought it was really
It's
interesting.
it's worth experimenting with because sometimes that will work.
Yeah.
I've had good luck on the like figuring out like, well, what is this style? Like, right, the modern corporate style was something I figured out by putting some images in and saying like, how do I describe this style? Like,
Yeah.
what's the phrase for that? That's part of it too. So I
Yeah.
think, remembering to have it be, remembering to prompt explicitly for inclusion, remembering to prompt
Yes.
for, you take advantage of the fact that you can. Like, yes, I used Asian as a prompt there, and of course, if you say Asian, it's going to default to somebody who looks Chinese or Japanese or Korean,
Right.
but you can prompt for Filipino or Malaysian,
Yeah.
or right, you can prompt more specifically and get a much wider range of things that were really hard. I remember trying to do images and trying to find Native Americans in stock photo libraries, which is Native photos of Native Americans that are not horrifically stereotypical was a really hard thing.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, it's, like that's something that if I was trying to do that course now, I would have such an easier time
Mhm.
finding, being able to generate images to do the representation that I wanted for this class on Native American issues in
Right.
education, right? That would have been, I wish I was doing it now, that 10 years ago, it was a real struggle to find
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, Christy, thank you so much for this. Thanks for being a part of the event, closing it out for us. You gonna be speaking anywhere? Are you doing a fall tour or anything?
I will be at DevLearn. That's my
Ah.
next thing. Tentatively, I, I, I think we need to confirm our date on it. I have another planning to do a webinar with Training Mag Network that will be me and Garima Gupta and Rance Green are
Oh, okay.
planning, trying to get something,
Wow.
trying to get out the three of our schedules coordinated has been a little of a challenge, but
Wait,
that's
the
the plan.
three of you? Like
The three of us
what is
doing
that?
some panel and doing some stuff together on storytelling and scenarios and things. So
Yeah.
that's one that we're trying to when I get we were trying to get a date in November, and I'm not sure that we actually got our things coordinated on our schedule. So watch for that once we get things figured out for that. That'll be the next one.
Interesting. Yeah.
That
Keep me
should
posted.
be
I'll
that one should be really
promo it for you.
fun to
Yeah,
do.
that's those are
Yeah.
the three of you together. That would be really, really intriguing.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone once again for attending the Accessible and Inclusive Design Conference. We've got our 2025 version is now get a wrap. So thanks everyone. We'll see you next time. I am going to be posting a couple speaker proposal forms for our next two events. One's going to be for storytelling and one's going to be for graphic design and instructional design. So if you're at all interested, please participate in those. Those will be in the newsletter on Monday. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks again, Christy. Bye, Jika. We'll see
Yeah.
you later.